Konnichiwa, Samurai James here. In this video, we're going to talk about Menuki, the little decorative things on Japanese swords. So what are Menuki and how did they change over time? Alright, let's start off with one of my favorite swords, the tachi. Now the tachi, as I've said before, is worn with the blade down. And in this case, you'll see the Menuki are here on the omote side, on the outward facing side, up near the tsuba. If we look at the other side, there's one here on the bottom, down near the kashira, or the pommel. Now what does this mean? Well, it means when I'm drawing the sword, that as I place my hands around it, the one here on the bottom fits into the palm of my left hand, the one here at the top fits into the palm of my right hand. And this helps give a little bit more extra grip to it by filling in a little bit of the gap in the palm where your hand bends when you're holding on to something. Just gives a little bit more of a solid grip to it. It had a very functional purpose, so it helped to give a point of reference for the palm for holding it and keeping it in place, but it also helped cover the mikugi, which is the bamboo pin that holds the blade in place. So it not only had a functional purpose of protecting the pin, it also gave you something to help a little bit with your grip. Alright, now we've got a katana. If we were to put this in our sash as if we were wearing it normally, the omote side facing outwards and the ura side facing inwards, you'll see the Menuki here are still up by the tsuba on the omote side and over by the kashira on the ura side. Now let's draw the sword. Now as I grip it, notice that this is actually reversed. They are now under the fingertips on my right hand and on my left hand. Why did that happen? Usually it feels a little bit better to have it under the palm to help a little bit with swelling the handle out and give you a good point of reference on it and just give a little bit of something to hold into the meat of your hand like that. Well, the reason they did that now is because it shifted from practical to stylistic. The tachi was around for hundreds of years, and when the katana came around, they kept the same orientation for these Menuki, but since the blade had flipped, it actually reversed the way that they are on the handle. Now, does this mean that you can't use a katana as well as you could use a tachi because of the Menuki? No, it doesn't. That's a very small difference in it, and it's something that once you get accustomed to it, or if you're actually, like myself, accustomed to it being under the fingertips instead of the palm, there's really not much of a functional difference. You can cut perfectly fine with a sword, whether it's at the top here under the palms or under the fingertips. So it had no real bearing. It doesn't affect the sharpness of the sword. It's simply a personal preference. So why would they make this transition? Well, in the early days of the tachi, particularly with ones that didn't have any suka ito or wrap around it like this, it was really easy to remove the Menuki because they were simply sitting on top of the wood. And for those early ones, they actually had Menuki like this that had the pin as part of the actual decoration itself. So it wasn't a bamboo mikugi that was holding it in, it was actually a piece that was on the Menuki itself. It not only covered and protected that piece that holds the sword together like that, it looked nice. So with a katana, well, what if this is wrapped under this wrap and it's covering the mikugi pin? Well, then you can't disassemble it, can you? You would have to actually unwrap everything and take the Menuki out and then pop the pin out and then rewrap everything. And that would be terrible for basic maintenance. So you'll notice in the case of this sword, it's actually got two mikugi, one here, neither of which are underneath of the Menuki, so the Menuki simply are serving as decoration, and they're sitting in the place that traditionally they were for hundreds of years. Okay, are you thinking, hold on, Samurai James, I don't know, I'm pretty sure I've seen like these things in the middle or down here or something. Well, you have. This is simply the more traditional layout, and there are other variations, and I'm going to show you some examples. Alright y'all, stop laughing. Yes, it's a wall hanger. Yes, it's a replica of The Last Samurai sword. Yes, I like the movie. It's a movie, not a documentary. It's a subject for a whole other video. But point being here is, notice the Menuki on it. It's actually right here and right here. And if I draw out this beautiful 440 stainless steel blade, you'll notice that the Menuki are actually under my palm, and they're under my palm. So even though this is a katana, they're in tachi position, which makes them more functional as something under the palms. Alright, simmer down. We'll put the wall hanger away and I'll show you another example. Alright, here's yet another example of Menuki in a different position than you would traditionally see. In this case, this is a type of wrap called a katati maki, which is often just referred to as a battle wrap in English. You'll see it has traditional diamonds here at the top and the bottom, and then here it's got a spiral that goes all the way down. But in this case, the Menuki are in the middle of the suka, not at the top and the bottom. So as I roll it over, you can see they're both in the same location. And this may look like a long suka. That's correct because it's a nodachi. I love nodachis just like I love tachis. But you can see there's almost no case where the Menuki are going to be under my palms like this. I'm losing leverage, so I would often be spaced out like this. Like this, the sword is unbalanced and silly. So in this case, they are basically nothing but a functional decoration, but they're kind of cool, so yeah. And here's one more example of Menuki on a katana. In this case, these are actually John Cena Menuki. You can't see them? No, you really can't see them. I'm just kidding, they're not John Cena Menuki. They're Ninja Menuki. You can't see those either? Ah, well, in that case, that means this sword actually doesn't have any Menuki at all. And that's okay. Not every sword, historically, that had Ito wrapping had Menuki under it. Some just had a simple coin or other thing to give a little bit of swelling to the wrap here for handling purposes without being all that pretty. There's a lot of swords that were more functional than they were pretty, and, you know, that have basically just gone away over time because they weren't that pretty. They were used, they were damaged, they were lower quality, and that's just what happens. But you can actually, in some cases, get a sword, as I had this one customized for, without any Menuki at all. I wanted to see how it feels, and I really don't notice a huge difference between no Menuki, Menuki under the palms, or Menuki under the fingertips. Historically, not all swords were high-end. Some of the cheaper swords may not have had any Menuki under them at all. They may have had a simple iron tsuba on it. So, to have a sword that doesn't have any at all is also perfectly fine historically. Now we've seen the different examples. In the cases where the Menuki aren't where we expect them to be, would that be wrong? It's not particularly wrong. It's a style called Gyaku Menuki, which simply means reversed Menuki. They're just flipping the positions on them. Some types of swordsmanship, such as Toyama Ryu and Nakamura Ryu, actually prefer the Gyaku Menuki, where they're reversed and they are underneath of the palms on a katana, rather than under the fingertips. Now, of course, that's a style of swordsmanship, and if you're a swordsman using a sword, then you may go for the practical feeling of it, feeling better under the palms, even if it looks a little bit weird and unbalanced when it's on display and down towards the edge of the sword rather than up towards the tsuba, but that's one of the concessions you make for functional over pretty. Now, are there other things where the Menuki shifted just a little bit? They weren't always exactly one diamond up from the tsuba, they were just more towards that end rather than the other. There's a few other rules, such as for the animals, if you had animal-themed Menuki, the head should be pointed up towards the tsuba, and the tail should be pointed down towards the kashira for the pommel. That would apply on both sides, so if you're on this side, head and tail this way, you flip it over, it would be the same thing with head and tail facing in the same direction. Another type of motif that had a specific direction that they should face, even if it wasn't specific to whether it should be at the top or the bottom, were plants. If you have a plant-style motif that has perhaps flowers or bamboo like that, the roots go towards the tsuba and the leaves or the flowers go down towards the kashira, towards the pommel. Now, is this written down and codified and adhered to by every swordsmith and fittings maker in history? No. It's just something that was more common than the others. In the case of lower-end swords, they may not be paying attention to where the Menuki are, they may not care. The client may actually be a left-handed person that said to actually put them in a different spot. So there's a lot of reasons that they might not be in exactly the same place. This wasn't a written rule that all of Japan had to follow. The sword makers who didn't know where it had to go probably just went with what they felt like or what the customer asked for. At the end of the day, if someone is paying for this, especially a higher-ranking samurai or someone of money who's getting, you know, a very fancy sword, you're going to put them where they ask, even if tradition says to put it somewhere else, because that's your business and that's how you make your money. So if there's no threat of death, then you're going to do what they ask. Not every sword has them in exactly the same place. This is just the most common places that you would see it, and again, that varies sometimes between the school of swordsmanship, if you're getting a sword made for that particular thing, or sometimes by the smith, the province, the area that it was made. It might be more prominent in one way or the other. But as a general rule, I've covered what the majority of the swords that you're seeing will be like. And if nothing else, remember what they said in Star Trek, only a smith deals in absolutes. If you're still here and you stood through that, I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe below. And as always, Samurai James saying thanks for watching, and sayonara. Oh, I wonder how many bad comments I'm going to get for the Star Trek and Smith thing.